Hi, this is Peter. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Cane Pole. In my last video, I discussed I was going to cover a topic that kind of polarizes people. It's you're either one side of the fence or the other side of the fence. Usually, you're not in the middle. I find myself more on the middle ground, and I think more anglers would find themselves more on the middle ground if the two other ends were not so diametrically opposed, and if you're not one, you're the other, and you're wrong. Alright, we're going to talk about catch and release versus catch and keep. You all know, if you have seen my videos, I do eat fish. I do keep fish. Not too long ago, I got chided, and the person who did it knew me and knew what was going on about keeping some small fish. For management practices, sometimes you have to keep a few undersized fish. A big old turtle over there. Sometimes you have to keep a few undersized fish to keep your population right. That's what I was doing with the largemouth bass in my pond. You've seen them. They've actually started getting smaller and smaller and more numerous, which is not a bad thing, but I'd like to have a little bit bigger quality of fish. So, been removing a few. The fishing club I belong to, all you get is a whole bunch of cookie cutter, under 14-inch bass, generally 10 to 12 inches. 11 inches is about the average that comes out. There are a few bigger fish, so we are removing a few of that size bass, and that's some that you've seen me eat in the past. The reason behind it is, in order to feed 1 pound of bass, whether it's a 1 pound fish or 10 or 2 half-pound fish, it takes about the same amount of food. It takes a little bit less to feed the 1 pound bass than it does to feed the smaller ones, which is also an issue. If you've got too many smaller ones, they're actually eating more food than even the same number of larger fish comparatively. There is where it balances out. Now, on a small pond, if it eats 3 a week versus 2 a week, you're not really saving that much, but you need to remove some of the smaller fish in a fertile small pond, or there will be a whole bunch of them and not a whole bunch of large ones. It's my opinion. It is somewhat backed and based on science fact. There are cases where if you go to a small pond and there's a bunch of people fishing this small pond, they will take all the big fish and there'll be no small fish. There'll be nothing left for small fish. So in that instance, you should probably release more than your, practice catch and release. Catch and keep in a healthy pond that is not overfished is not a problem. On a species that's not overfished is not a problem. By the same token, you don't need to keep a cooler full of fish if you're going to eat 3 or 4 and put the rest in the freezer for getting freezer burnt and thrown out. You should only keep what you're going to eat. The number of fish that you intend on consuming in a meal, or maybe, put up another meal's worth in your freezer. I've done that. That's not a problem. But catching and keeping everything you catch is not a good idea, even in an environment where it would support a lot of catch and keep fishing. Now, I'm going to caveat that by saying, if the biologists have said keep everyone of this size or smaller, then you probably need to keep everyone of this size or smaller. There are management practices where they have a slot size, and they recommend you keep everything in the slot. If they have fishery limits set, they're a little tighter, and don't have a slot size, keep within that tighter limit, but realize that you need to release fish in order to catch fish tomorrow, even when you're keeping. It's a balancing act. Fisheries biologists and wildlife, when they recommend the laws, just have a time of it. I'm lucky I have my own private pond. I can decide what I want to do. If I wanted to manage this and take every bass out of here, I could, and just manage it for catfish, I could do that. I'm trying to manage my pond where I have a fairly large brim, So I do need the bass to keep the population of small ones down and eat, most of the small ones, if once they get to a certain size, they will grow. If we keep the small ones down. If I didn't have the bass out there to eat the small brim, I might overpopulate with brim and have a bunch of small brim. I don't mind having smaller bass. Say that same 11-inch cookie cutter size. I like that. They're fun to catch. Some people actually call them rocket bass because they jump out the water and they're more acrobatic than a 10-pound fish. I enjoy that. I do a lot of fly fishing out here, and I do a lot of light tackle fishing, and I want to have fun when I'm fishing my own back pond. By the same token, my fish are getting to be 10 inches and even shorter than that. So I do need to take a few, and they're more numerous, but I need to take a few out to allow them to grow up a little bit. That's personal management. On a personal small, I'm the only person, well, the neighbor, but they don't even keep fish. They don't fish half as much as I do. But that's management on a small scale level. On a large lake, there are limits, there are rules, there are laws, and they're in place for a reason. Now, the DNR didn't set your laws anywhere you are. That's always set by the state government on recommendation of the DNR. Right? Recently, our DNR in saltwater has taken and reduced the limit of spot-tailed bass you can keep because there's a population problem, the declining population of spot-tailed bass. I personally don't keep any. I let them go. The last one I kept, I caught in Florida and I thought my grandnephew wanted it. Turns out he filleted it and put it in the freezer for a hard freeze for us to take home. I appreciate it. It was a very good fish to eat, but I'm going to release it. I can catch a whole bunch of whiting, which are just as good in my opinion, if not a little bit better. And there's tons of whiting out there. They're not in a threatened position. Also, the DNR is recommending you release spotted sea trout. Although they're not as threatened, there was not as bad a fish kill over the winter as they thought there was. Just food for thought. You need to look at stuff like that, and you need to decide what works for you along with the regulation, along with keeping with the regulations. But there's nothing wrong with keeping a few fish for the table. Just like there's nothing wrong with releasing everything you catch. Just do it responsibly and do it with knowledge of what you're doing, and do it with the future fishery in mind. Like I said, I need to keep a few of the smaller bass out my pond, and I've started doing that because I haven't been keeping anything. I've been releasing everything, and I've noticed a population change. That's personal. That's a management practice I've got to keep up with. If you're not supposed to keep any fish in this area, don't keep any fish in this area. If you're supposed to keep a bunch of fish in this area, there is a reason behind that. Keep a bunch. Otherwise, and even then, even if you're allowed to keep a bunch, try and keep it in with what you're going to have for a meal today or tomorrow. You go out, you go fishing, you have dinner or fish, or you're going to have fish the next day. If you're having a few people over for a fish fry, go ahead, keep your fish. But by leaving some to catch another time, you can go back next week and get you another meal of fish. You will not find frozen fish in my freezer right now, outside of a few little bait fish that I've frozen out. But that's a little different. You won't find any frozen fish in my freezer. I will go, if I want fish, I'll run them down to the club or come out here even and catch me some fish. I'll run saltwater and go catch me some fish. You can pretty much, except maybe dead of winter, and even then you can pretty much catch fish when you go fishing if you know what you're doing. And I don't mean you have to be an expert on it. By no means am I an expert. I'm always learning. But if you know a little bit about catching fish and you know how to go fishing, you can catch you a meal, bring it home, have you a meal, and do it again tomorrow, do it again next week. You don't have to bring home hundreds of fish and put them in your freezer. Besides, fresh fish tastes better. Alright, that's enough preaching. I hope it kind of explained what the middle ground is and what I believe on the subject. Neither way is right because management practices usually require you keep a few fish regardless. And they also require that you don't keep everything you catch. And that's why we have rules, that's why we have regulations, that's why there are recommendations out there. I could have my pond surveyed. I'm not going to have an electrofishing boat come up in a small pond. And they could tell me exactly what I need to catch and exactly what I need to remove. That's why sometimes you got to follow those guidelines too. Alright, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I've got one more video coming out that I'm going to preset to drop. And it'll probably drop while my wife and I are actually going on our camping trip. And then hopefully we'll have some video from fishing in the mountains and being camping.